You've crunched the numbers, made a solid offer, and you thought the deal was on, yet the landlord still says no. It's one of the most frustrating parts about rent to rent, because your offer makes sense, yet you're still getting rejected. But here's the truth, landlords don't just say no because of the numbers. It's about how they feel, it's about the risk, and it's about how certain you are about your solution. In this video, I'm going to share the game-changing tactics which is going to change all that. Make sure that landlords are invested, make sure agents do put your offer forward to the landlord, and make sure that you can bag your next deal. Before we dive in, the foundations of turning no's into yeses is making sure your business setup is on point. So if you would like to learn how to set up your rent-to-rent business, Rent-to-Rent 2.0 style, hit the link below this video to get your free guide. The biggest mistake I see people making, and this is why you're getting so many no's, is what tends to happen is the traditional way of sourcing rent-to-rent deals is to go through letting agents. But if we're really honest, okay, in all my years of sourcing rent-to-rent deals for me and other people, I know for an absolute fact that, okay, there's only a small amount of agents that are open to rent-to-rent. And the main reason for this, by the way, is because it is different to their core business model. And the big problem with that is it basically means that you are fighting an uphill battle, guys, because look at this. This massive chunk of agencies are just going to be telling you no. A lot of the time, they'll say, we'll put your offer forward to the landlord, and they never do. You never hear back from them. And a lot of you just quit because you've tried so many agents, so many people are telling you no. It knocks your confidence. You doubt yourself. You think this doesn't work in my area. But here is the thing. When you focus on landlords and cut out the middleman, what you're going to find with landlords is it's completely different. There's only a tiny amount of landlords that wouldn't like a guaranteed monthly rent. There's only a tiny amount of landlords that wouldn't want a long-term let, a let where they don't have to do anything. So all of a sudden what happens is the market swings in your favor, and you've got a huge chunk of landlords that, as long as you communicate your messaging correctly, why wouldn't they want it? When I realized this, and when I realized I needed to focus on the landlords and really master this technique, everything changed. But when dealing with landlords, you can't just go on Rightmove and pick up the phone or go into town and go into an office. So they're a little bit harder to find. But what I also find is neglected is the context around landlords. If you think about it, a lot of landlords, their property portfolio or property will be their biggest asset. They're going to be extremely protective over it. And if they've decided not to go with an agent, or if they're going to consider leaving their high street agent and using you instead, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. They're going to have their doubts, and it's about understanding how to overcome their doubts, which is going to be the key to success. So when dealing with landlords' doubts, it's really, really important that we deal with this, and we deal with this head on. Because the top way to lose a rent-to-rent deal, this is the top way, I always see this, is because you're brand new, there is a massive delay. It could be a delay in you reaching out to the landlord, a delay in you arranging the viewing, a delay in your offer, a delay in the contract stage, a delay when you're thinking twice as to whether this is going to work. And delays create doubt. Creates doubt for you. It creates doubt for the landlord. So the first way to turn a no into yes is to always be mindful that you want to reduce the delays. Now, disclaimer, there is a time to delay and a time for speed. Okay, a time for delay is once you get into the nitty-gritty of the contract and you've got to take your time to get it right. But in terms of arranging the viewing, putting the offer in, saying yes, the offer letter, the follow-up call, all of that stuff should be done as quickly as possible. The second character, the second letter, the second biggest mistake I see people making is they Can you guess? They overthink. All right? They over procrastinate. They overthink about every single thing that they're going to say to the landlord. They overshare. They over communicate. All of these things kill the deal. And what happens if you tend to overthink and overshare and over communicate, the landlord starts to get a little bit nervous. Think back to when you was a kid, when you was a teenager, you used to go out, all right? And your dad or your mum says, "Where have you been?" Best thing for you to say is, "Our John's, our mates, out." Get yourself to the bedroom. If you start saying, what it was I went out, we was going to come home, but then Charles invited. You see how you start looking a bit techie? It starts looking a bit suspicious. So you do not want to cause this energy with a landlord. Now, I've seen situations where you can feel the landlord's yes and appetite to do the deal turn into an instant no. So be really mindful, never to overshare, never to overthink. Rent to rent is sales, okay? Life is sales. The question is, can you convince somebody to let you have their property for 5 years and you generate a cash flow? That is a sales environment. So what you need to make sure that you do is, when we look at the definition of sales, it is the transfer of certainty, all right? If they detect any doubt in the solution, doubt in your knowledge, doubt in your credibility, it's not going to work. So you need to make sure that you kill all your uncertainty. There, put my Y there. So you need to make sure that you are not uncertain. You are certain about the rent, certain about the term, certain about the start date, certain about the works required, certain about what happens if X within the contract. Because if you are uncertain at any point, you are going to come undone. Now, every now and then, you could have done everything right. There was no delays. You didn't overthink or overshare. There was no uncertainty on your part. But you have to understand, sometimes, I'm afraid, it's just going to be a bad fit. There's nothing you can do about it. I've had this. I've had situations where I felt the deal was on, it was all perfect, but when it came down to it, it was a bad fit. Now, I always say that a good rent-to-rent deal consists of two different things. Sure, the property is 50% of a good deal, but the second part is the landlord. So mind out for landlords that live next door, that want to be overly involved, that lived in the property for 20 years, so have a huge emotional connection. Look out for it being a bad fit, and make sure if at any stage you feel in your gut, maybe this isn't right, just move on. There's plenty more houses out there. So don't get overly fixated on something if it's not flowing. And last but not least, and it's possibly the most important, this is going to be the game changer. In fact, I'm actually going to do it in green. You need to make sure people do business with who they know, like, and trust. So it's really important to build trust. How do you do that? Okay, you do what you say you do when you say you're going to do it in the right manner. You show up, you're on point. Really, really important. If you leave the viewing and say you're going to send them an email today, send them an email today. Really important. So just to summarize, minimize delays, minimize oversharing and overthinking, maximize certainty, and make sure that you're avoiding all uncertainty. If it's a bad fit, nothing personal, it's just one of those things, move on. And build trust at every stage to get success. If you're getting value from this, do me a favor, go ahead, hit the subscribe button. I respond to all the comments, so comment below, more than happy to help. Now let's go a level deeper. I want to give you 5 quick wins, okay? Things that often turn yeses into nos. I see mentees that have deals in principle fall out of bed, and it's usually for one of these 5 reasons. So, number 1, the first thing that we really need to avoid, really, really key, is whenever a landlord asks you about who is going to be in the property, you need absolute clarity on that. Because if you don't have a really clear angle here, it sounds dodgy as hell. Now, I know what you're thinking. You may not know your exact tenant or exact guest yet. That's okay. My aim or my advice is to focus on who you are targeting. So even if you don't know definitively who, if you're brand new in an area, you're near an airport or an Amazon, guess who your tenants or guests are going to be in town for, all right? So what you do is you have clarity on this, and when asked, you communicate this clearly. The second, this pen's a bit techie. The second big one is how often are people entering the property, leaving the property. People don't like this, okay? People do not like this. If there is high turnover of tenants, they fear that their property is going to get banged in, trashed. So once again, you may not know the definitive terms of the turnovers of your tenants or guests, but once again, you need to have a clear aim, all right? And less is more here. You do not want to give the impression that you're having people coming in and out every single day. That shouldn't be your aim in Rent to Rent 2.0 anyway. Our aim is to go for medium and long-term stays. On a lot of my properties, I have a higher minimum night stay, and I'm really trying to get high level qualities for my SA properties. For my HMOs, I want to do minimum 6 months in most scenarios. So remember, who, have clarity, turnover wise, also have clarity, and do not sound dodgy, do not sound uncertain. It will instantly turn them off. Third most common turn off, how to turn a yes into a no. Let's say the landlord really likes the idea of what you're offering, but then you make a silly offer. Okay, silly offer. Because here's the thing, unlike buying a property, rental markets have very little room for negotiating. I've built my business and I've built hundreds of mentees' businesses through doing something really simple, and that is always offering asking or above. Now, I know what you're thinking, that sounds crazy. What happens if the figures don't work? Look, every now and then it might make sense to come to an agreement to offer lower rent, but it's an agreement. You do not go and offer silly offers. You want to be offering asking or above. And basically, the way I actually do this is I actually ask them, okay? So I ask what rent they need. That instantly stops you from offering silly offers, because if I ask them and say, what rent do you need? And they say 2,000, and I say, is there any room for movement? They say, absolutely not. Our mortgage is X. It's pointless you offering any lower. So avoid silly offers at all costs. Number 4. Okay, you missed a massive objection. I nearly forgot how to spell that then. You missed a massive objection. In other words, what this means is they felt like it was really important for them to be able to inspect the property, or they felt it was really important for them to have the option of selling after 12 months. If you didn't uncover that in your discovery, it could be the reason that they ghost you. And last but not least, and this is a tricky one to be honest with you, if you are inexperienced, okay, if you have a brand new business, if it's your first deal and you're lacking credibility and experience, this can be a big turn off. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you hit the link below to download my business setup guide. Those 12 steps really alleviate this. And I've found that when I work with people brand new, and we do that in 10 days, they can still get a deal in 4 to 6 weeks. And we can get past all of those once you follow everything that I've shared in this video. Now, I've been seeing a lot of yeses turning into nos from the following objection I'm about to share with you. And I've actually demonstrated this in the community. I've showed people how to overcome this, and I want to share it with you right now. So check it out. What happens is, blue is Mr. Jones, all right? This is you, the renter. You've viewed the property. Why? Because Mrs. Jones is at work and couldn't get to the property. So a lot of the time you will find you only get one spouse at the viewing. And what I teach that at this viewing, you want to basically get a provisional yes. And that's brilliant because Mr. Jones is 100% in. He loves the idea. But what happens is Mr. Jones goes home that night and has to run it by Mrs. Jones. And this is when things start to go wrong. Because if you've not communicated it correctly and they still have questions, that conversation here is not going to go very well. So the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that whenever you're at the property with one spouse, you make sure that they are 100% in. Because what you'll find is if they're not 100% in and if they have questions, they will never communicate it correctly. And then what always happens, I see this all the time, is this turns into a no, you get a phone call, you get an email, they cancel the follow-up or whatever it is, and you lose the deal. What you really want to do is make sure that Mr. Jones is 100% in. Coach Mr. Jones on how to communicate it to Mrs. Jones, maybe even give a brochure or a leaflet. And then we want to arrange a follow-up, which I ideally like on Zoom. Okay, try and do this on Zoom or in person. In person is even better. Okay, so what you want to do is when you put the offer letter in, so in between here and here, you're going to send an offer email. And when you do, all you want to do is agree on the rent and the term and then invite Mr. and Mrs. Jones for this meeting. This is how you'll get the yes. This is how you get the deal. If you're looking to source rent-to-rent deals, check out this video, The Deal Ladder, where I show you how to turn a cold lead into a hot rent-to-rent deal.